The $190,000 secret that kills the 40-year grind, and why Wall Street hopes you never find it. Picture this. Two men, same age, same starting salary, same address on the same suburban block. Fast forward 30 years. One of them is still setting an alarm for 6 a.m., still dreading Monday, still terrified to check his 401k balance. The other man walked away from the rat race in his late 30s. Not because he won the lottery, not because he inherited a fortune, but because he understood a single number. One number. And the moment he touched it, he never had to save another dollar again. Two identical lives. Two wildly different endings. And the gap between them isn't luck. It's math. Math that the entire retirement industry quietly hopes you never learn. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody tells you on your first day of work. The traditional retirement system was never built to set you free. It was built to keep you productive for as long as possible, extracting a fixed percentage of your labor for 4 straight decades, while an army of fund managers schemes fees off the top of your patience. Go to school, get the job, sit in traffic, tolerate the boss, defer your life to a spreadsheet that promises freedom at 65. If you're lucky, if the market cooperates, if you don't get laid off at 58 and have to start over. That's not a retirement plan. That's a leash with a very long chain. But here's where the story takes its first turn. Rewind 230 years to a dying man named Benjamin Franklin. In 1790, Franklin left behind a strange gift in his will, not to his children, but to the future citizens of Boston and Philadelphia. He willed each city a modest sum, a few $1,000s, with one bizarre condition. Nobody could touch it for 100 years. Then a portion could be spent, and the rest had to sit untouched, compounding for another 100 years after that. Franklin understood something most people still don't. Money left alone, growing quietly in the dark, becomes a monster no salary can compete with. By the time both cities finally cashed out in 1990, 2 centuries later, that handful of thousands had ballooned into millions. Franklin never worked another day after his death, and yet his money kept working alone for 200 years. That is the exact principle hiding inside a modern strategy called Coast Fire. And it's the reason a 28-year-old with the right number in the bank can out-earn a 58-year-old who has been grinding his entire life. So what is this number? Financial independence has a hardcore older cousin, regular fire, where extremists save 70% of their paycheck, eat plain rice for a decade, and retire completely by 30. Impressive. Also miserable for most human beings. Coast Fire is the quieter, saner sibling. It isn't about retiring early. It's about front-loading just enough pain, early enough that compound interest finishes the marathon without you. Think about biology for a second, specifically bacteria in a petri dish. A single bacterium divides into 2. 2 becomes 4. For the first several hours, almost nothing visibly changes. The dish looks nearly empty. Then, in the final few doublings, the entire dish fills up in what looks like an instant. That's not an accident of biology. It's the signature of every exponential curve on Earth, including the one sitting quietly in your brokerage account. Your 20s and early 30s are the invisible hours in the petri dish. It feels like nothing is happening. It's the most discouraging phase, and it's also the most important one, because it's quietly setting up an explosion nobody can see coming yet. Now, let's put real numbers on 2 lives. Call them the grinder and the coaster. Both start working at 25. Both eventually want $2 million by 65. The grinder does everything right by conventional wisdom. $500 a month, every single month, for 40 consecutive years. No breaks, no vacations from the discipline. And an average 8% return. He crosses the finish line with roughly $1.7 million. Respectable. Also 40 years of monthly sacrifice, never once switched off. The coaster plays it differently. From 25 to 35, he goes almost feral with saving, cutting corners, living tight, throwing every spare dollar into index funds. By his 35th birthday, he's sitting on $250,000. And then he simply stops. Not stops working, stops saving. He lets that $250,000 sit untouched for the next 30 years while he spends every other dollar he earns on his actual life. Travel, a better apartment, whatever he wants. At the same 8%, that $250,000 alone swells into roughly $2.5 million by age 65. He out-earned the grinder. He has more money, and he stopped sacrificing 3 decades earlier. That's not a rounding error. That's the entire game, hiding in plain sight the whole time. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The psychological cost of the traditional path isn't just financial, it's biological. Chronic low-grade financial anxiety keeps cortisol elevated for years at a stretch, and financial stress has consistently been linked to disrupted sleep, weakened immune response, and decision fatigue that bleeds into every other corner of life. That tight, low hum of, I should be saving more, living in the back of your skull every time you check your bank account isn't just annoying. It's a chronic stressor your body treats like a low-grade, permanent threat. The moment you cross your Coast Fire number, something strange happens. That specific anxiety doesn't fade slowly. It tends to disappear almost instantly because your brain finally registers the future as handled. Suddenly, the job paying $120,000 that's slowly killing you doesn't feel mandatory anymore. You can trade it for the $70,000 job that doesn't make your stomach hurt on Sunday nights because you're no longer funding two futures. You're just covering today. So how do you find your own number? It's a two-step reverse calculation, and it takes less time than scrolling your phone for 10 minutes. Step 1. Find your finish line at 65 using the rule of 25. Take your desired annual spending in retirement and multiply it by 25. Want $80,000 a year? You need $2 million. Step 2. Work backward. If you're 30 years old with 35 years until retirement, and you assume a conservative, inflation-adjusted 7% annual return, the math says you need roughly $190,000 sitting in low-cost index funds today, untouched, compounding, doing nothing but existing, to hit $2 million by 65 without ever contributing another dollar. $190,000. That's the invisible finish line for the accumulation phase of an entire life. Not the finish line for work, just the finish line for sacrifice. Now, the objections write themselves. What about a market crash? History says every crash in over a century of data has eventually been followed by recovery and new highs, given enough time. And 35 years is enough time. What about inflation? That's precisely why the math above uses a lowered 7% instead of the market's historical 10. The buffer is already baked in. And no, Coast Fire doesn't mean quitting tomorrow. You still have to earn enough to cover today's rent and groceries. What it removes is the second, hidden job, the one where you're also required to fund a stranger's version of your future at 65 while living a smaller life right now. Most people are running a race with no visible finish line, sprinting until their knees give out somewhere in their 60s, hoping it was enough. Coast Fire draws a line in the sand years, sometimes decades, earlier, and once you cross it, the second job disappears. The sacrifice was never supposed to be permanent. It was only ever supposed to be temporary and front-loaded, like Franklin's forgotten will, quietly compounding while everyone else keeps pushing. Find your number, write it down, and then go find out how fast you can actually get there.